Daniel LaRusso, since the beginning of Cobra Kai's release, has become the subject of arguments. Is he still the good guy, or has he always been the antagonist? If you watched one of my previous videos, Why Johnny Lawrence is the better sensei as of Season 2, you may have been inclined to believe I was anti-Daniel, but I'm not. As I said before, neither Johnny nor Daniel were ever the true antagonists of the series, and we can all agree that they both mean well but come up short because they're human. Season 3 has since shaken up many of the characters' arcs, whether they have been a constant to the show or old villains turned allies, and Daniel is certainly one of those characters who has had tremendous growth in one season alone. This is my opinion and theory of how Daniel finally found balance in Season 3, and his comparisons to his other predecessors, Sato and Miyagi, and how things will play out for him in the future and beyond. Let's recap on what we know about Daniel so far, and I will try to keep this brief as possible as Daniel has had the longest screen time since the first Karate Kid movie. Daniel LaRusso moves to Reseda, California in September of 1984, and his life has changed forever as he meets his first true love, Allie Mills, at a beach gathering and also meets his longtime rival, Allie's ex, Johnny Lawrence, that same day. While trying to be chivalrous and making sure Allie's okay, Johnny takes offense to Daniel's butting in, as he is also jealous that Daniel was talking to Allie, despite that he broke up with Allie prior to this, and beats up Daniel, embarrassing him in front of everybody. Johnny goes on to antagonize Daniel not only at school, but also when Daniel tries to visit Cobra Kai to take lessons, only finding out that Johnny is Cobra Kai's lead student. Daniel increasingly grows frustrated living here in California, and goes on to form a slow but lasting friendship with his soon-to-be mentor, Nariyoshi Miyagi. Mr. Miyagi goes on to save Daniel from a crippling beatdown after a run-in he has with Johnny and his gang at the Halloween dance, and goes with him to Cobra Kai to talk to John Kreese, and have them settle their affairs at the All Valley tournament, with Kreese promising open season on both of them if they don't show. Mr. Miyagi promises to train Daniel, and at first, Daniel grows impatient as it seems that he's doing meaningless chores, but realizes that Mr. Miyagi has been training him through muscle memory. Despite only training for a month and a half, Daniel defeats almost every member of Johnny's gang until Bobby, Johnny's friend and fellow Cobra Kai student, is ordered by Kreese to take him out and injures Daniel's leg. Mr. Miyagi tries to convince Daniel that he no longer has to fight, but Daniel claims he will never have balance that way, knowing that Johnny and his gang got the best of him. Despite being at a severe disadvantage, Daniel goes on to compete in the finals against Johnny and wins the tournament. The Karate Kid Part 2 picks up at the end of the tournament, where Miyagi saves Johnny from being choked out by Kreese, and the majority of the movie takes place in the summer of 1985, where Miyagi goes to visit Okinawa at the request of his dying father, and is joined by Daniel, wanting to repay the favor of Miyagi always being there for him. Miyagi reveals the reason he came to America is that he wanted to go against tradition by announcing his love for Yukie, his childhood crush, in front of the entire village, as the tradition was normally arranged marriages. However, Yukie was to be wed to Sato, Miyagi's childhood friend and the only non-Miyagi student to be taught Miyagi-Do. Sato challenged Miyagi to a fight to the death, but Miyagi instead chose to leave and not to have to choose between his friendship and his love. Upon arriving, they are introduced and picked up by Chozen, Sato's nephew, who is a bit of a bully and prides himself on the Taguchi name, as Sato is now rich and very powerful. Sato has not forgotten about his grudge, but allows Mr. Miyagi 3 days to mourn the death of his father, and still wants to settle their feud in a fight to the death. During all this, Daniel is introduced to Kumiko, Yukie's niece, and has a romance with her, as Allie and Daniel had broken up before going to Okinawa. Things take a turn for the worse when Sato forces Miyagi to either fight or the entire village will be demolished. That night, a typhoon arrives and Sato is trapped beneath his dojo. Miyagi saves his rival, and this causes Sato to later on have a change of heart, and instructs his nephew Chozen to help Daniel save Yuna, a girl who lives in the village, but Chozen refuses due to his prior issues with Daniel. Sato goes on to disown Chozen, and Chozen runs off into the storm in disgrace. The next day, Sato comes to help rebuild, where he asks for Miyagi's forgiveness, and receives it, and Daniel suggests that they have the Oban vessel in the castle, which Sato agrees only if Daniel celebrates with him. When Kumiko goes on to perform her dance at the festival, Chozen reappears and demands a fight to the death with Daniel for dishonoring him. After a lengthy battle, Daniel is able to use the drum technique, something he learned earlier in the movie from Mr. Miyagi, and spares Chozen's life, despite Chozen insisting on a warrior's death. The Karate Kid Part 3 takes place right after Daniel and Miyagi returned from Okinawa, and while they were gone, the Cobra Kai dojo lost all of its students, forcing John Kreese to seek out his old war buddy, Terry Silver, to turn in the keys. However, Terry refuses and agrees to seek revenge for John while he heals up in Tahiti, concocting an elaborate plan to embarrass Daniel at the next All Valley. Lucille, Daniel's mother, is called to New Jersey to take care of Daniel's Uncle Louie. The apartments they once lived in are being sold, forcing Mr. Miyagi out of a job and Daniel out of a home, but Mr. Miyagi allows Daniel to stay with him for a while. Daniel and Mr. Miyagi go on to open a bonsai tree shop. Meanwhile, Terry recruits well-known national karate fighter Mike Barnes as part of his plan to beat Daniel, promising him 25%, later 50% because of Mike's negotiations, of ownership of the new Cobra Kai dojos if he defeats Daniel. Daniel also wants to enter the tournament to defend his title, but Miyagi refuses to sign the entry form, stating that karate is one thing if you need to defend your life, but means nothing to defend the honor of a plastic trophy. Mike Barnes goes on to confront Daniel multiple times throughout the movie, especially in front of his new friend Jessica, and soon proves to be unlike anybody he has fought before. After they steal the trees, Daniel and Jessica go on to pluck the bonsai tree Miyagi hid years ago in Devil's Cauldron to sell it for a profit. However, Mike, Snake, and Dennis force Daniel to sign the entry form before letting them back up, also snapping the bonsai tree in the process. Despite everything, Daniel was still on his own due to his miscommunication of plans to Mr. Miyagi to retrieve the bonsai tree. Prior to saving Daniel from Mike, Terry introduces himself as Kreese's fellow pupil under Master Kim Sun-young and goes on to apologize on behalf of his master for Kreese's actions, also stating that Kreese has died as part of his plan to lure the two into a false sense of security. Terry offers to train Daniel in the ways of Cobra Kai, most notably the Quicksilver method, which puts a strain on his relationship with Mr. Miyagi. After assaulting a patient out of anger at a nightclub due to Terry's orders that he try to cut in on Daniel and Jessica, Mr. Miyagi helps Daniel realize that he has strong roots and needs nothing else except what is inside himself to grow and flourish, inspiring him to tell Terry that he no longer needs to defend his title. Terry reveals his ruse, including his alliance with not only Mike, but the undead John Kreese, and Daniel is then saved by Mr. Miyagi, who defeats both senseis and Mike Barnes. Mr. Miyagi agrees to finally train Daniel after realizing their plot, and soon Daniel comes face to face with Mike in the All Valley. Mike is relentless and attacks Daniel with no mercy, both legally and illegally, which causes Daniel to want to give up out of fear. However, Miyagi coaches Daniel once again and reminds him to focus, and with the help of the kata that Mr. Miyagi showed him earlier, defends his title and defeats Cobra Kai once again. Due to Mike, Terry, and Kreese's actions, Cobra Kai is now banned for life from the All Valley. From this point of Cobra Kai, Daniel grows into an adult and maintains his near father-son relationship with Mr. Miyagi, eventually becoming the owner of a successful car dealership, meeting and marrying Amanda, and having 2 children, Samantha and Anthony. He also practiced Miyagi-Do nearly the rest of his life, and later on in Season 1, it is noted that he picked up karate again, implying that he stopped training, possibly because of Mr. Miyagi's passing in 2011, which occurred 7 years before Cobra Kai starts. In Season 1, Daniel runs into old rival Johnny again and ends up fixing his car for free, despite not knowing Sam's friends caused Johnny's car to be damaged to begin with. Daniel's PTSD also kicks in when he notices that Cobra Kai is back due to Johnny reopening it and confronts Johnny about beating up his daughter's boyfriend and her friends, although unaware that Kyler was the one that started the fight with Miguel. As time passes on, Daniel goes on to have more misunderstandings with Johnny, and they begin to train jabs back and forth at each other, such as Johnny's graffiti on his billboard out of a drunken rage, and Daniel raising the rent for all the stores in the strip mall solely to put Cobra Kai out of business. It is not until he visits Mr. Miyagi's grave and Amanda's disappointment in him of raising rent that he finds some balance and begins to practice Miyagi-Do once more. Daniel also takes new employee Robbie, unaware that he is Johnny's son, under his wing and trains him in the ways of Miyagi-Do, while also trying to prevent Cobra Kai from being reinstated to compete again in the All Valley tournament. Daniel is confronted by Johnny due to his cousin Louie and his biker friends taking revenge on Johnny for the graffiti by setting his car on fire, and Daniel is convinced by Amanda to give him a car to be done with him. During the test drive and having a few drinks, Daniel comes to realize that he and Johnny do have some things in common and slowly form a friendship. However, this comes to a halt when Johnny realizes Daniel was training his son, and Daniel realizes he is training Johnny's son, which he suspects is an elaborate plan by Johnny Lawrence, like Terry and Kreese did to him back in 1985. He then forbids Robbie to come around. Daniel manages to come to the All Valley and witness Robbie competing on his own, and goes on to coach Robbie in his final match against Johnny's top student Miguel, witnessing Robbie being able to perform the two-legged kick. Despite Robbie losing, Daniel takes him back to the Miyagi Dojo and reveals that he plans to take down Cobra Kai. Daniel goes on to realize that Cobra Kai is not the enemy at first, but is concerned when Johnny brings back Kreese. Daniel goes on to gain Samantha as another student, and another student in Dimitri. He does have other run-ins with Cobra Kai during the summer, such as them crashing their demonstration at Valley Fest, and their dojo being destroyed by Cobra Kai after Sam and Robbie fight Hawk and others at the mall. Daniel goes to confront Johnny and poach some of his students, which in turn causes Johnny to punish his students for doing so, as neither Daniel or Johnny realize that it was Kreese who told Hawk to go destroy Miyagi-Do. Daniel is confronted by Kreese at Miyagi-Do that a war will be coming, which is true as the big fight at the school happens near the end of the season, and goes on to train his students in preparation for this fight. Daniel also runs into Johnny once more at a double date, and realizes that Johnny forbid Kreese from coming around, and also wants things to change for the better. Daniel and Johnny come to a truce, which is broken the next day due to Sam being drunk at Moon's party and convincing Robbie not to take her back to her house, and Robbie instead takes her to Johnny's house, leaving Daniel and Johnny at odds once again. After the school fight, Daniel goes on to close Miyagi-Do at Amanda's suggestion and deals with the fallout of the school fight at a PTA meeting, and also begins to lose rapid sales to the dealership. Daniel wants to help Robbie and enlists the help of Johnny to do so, admitting that he had fault in the situation just as much as Johnny did. Thanks to Shannon, Robbie's mother and Johnny's ex, they find a lead on Robbie, but Daniel stops working with Johnny after their fight in a chop shop due to Johnny aggressively beating up a guy during his interrogation. Daniel eventually finds Robbie and has the police come to arrest him so that he can build a case and have a lighter sentence for what he did to Miguel, but Robbie feels betrayed and refuses to take his calls in juvie. Daniel also has to deal with Tom Cole trying to convince Doyona to cut their ties with LaRusso Auto, which he avoids telling the dealership to Cole thanks to the help of Anush forewarning them, who told Louis when Cole had their meeting with Daniel and Amanda. This leads Daniel to visit Doyona headquarters in Japan, who refuses his offer, and he decides to make a trip to Okinawa to try to find some more answers. He reunites with Kumiko, who shows him a letter from Mr. Miyagi that he wrote to Yukie while he was sick, revealing to Daniel that he was a guiding light as much as Mr. Miyagi was to him. Kumiko also reunites Daniel with Chozen, who believes that he has not changed, but Chozen goes on to show him a secret Miyagi technique that was previously unknown to Daniel. They also reconcile and forgive each other for their rivalry in the past, and Kumiko manages to reunite Daniel with Yuna, who uses her position in Doyona and saves LaRusso Auto, repaying the favor when Daniel saved her life in the typhoon. Daniel returns to find out about Amanda's run-in with Kreese, and they try to make a deal with Armand to force him out, but Kreese retaliates by putting snakes in the dealership. Daniel is also able to help Samantha train in Miyagi-Do again by revealing that he also had a traumatic experience once with Mike Barnes, which later goes on to help Sam in her fight against Tori. Although Daniel tries, along with Johnny, to reconcile with Robbie, it is in vain as Robbie wants nothing to do with both of them. While he tries to appeal, alongside Johnny and Kreese, for the All Valley to not be cancelled by City Council, it is Miguel who is able to prevent the tournament from being cancelled, thanks to assistance by Sam. Daniel goes on to finally reunite with Allie, but is surprised to see that Johnny is her date, and is finally convinced by Allie that he and Johnny are not much different and should try to work together as they have more in common than they realize. After realizing Kreese sent Cobra Kai to invade his house, Daniel shows up to save Johnny from being choked out and is about to kill Kreese until Miguel and Sam intervene. Kreese agrees to settle this once and for all at the next All Valley, and Daniel and Johnny finally work together to train their dojos together. In my previous video, I noted a lot of similarities between Johnny and Miyagi, and there were quite a few comments comparing Daniel to Sato. Let's take a look at how Daniel is very similar to Sato, Miyagi's friend and rival from Karate Kid Part 2. The first and obvious similarity is Sato's grudge against Miyagi, much like Daniel still holding this grudge against Johnny throughout Season 1 and 2. Sato also believes that Miyagi is nothing more than a coward because he avoided fighting to the death, much how Daniel believes that the people that he knows, such as Kreese, Chozen, and Johnny, have an inability to change who they are and are unable to reform their ways. Both have used their power as influence, Daniel especially with his relationship with Armand, and Sato being the karate instructor for Kadena Air Base, not to mention his family was the wealthiest in the village when he and Miyagi were growing up. With this influence, they backed their rival into a corner, where Sato threatened to destroy the village if Miyagi did not agree to fight him, and Daniel almost putting Johnny's Cobra Kai out of business when he convinced Armand to raise the rent for the entire strip mall. Eventually, Sato reforms his way after Miyagi saves him during a typhoon, and asks for Miyagi's forgiveness the next day as he brings his company to help rebuild the village. Much like Daniel finally putting his differences aside with Johnny at the end of Season 3, and ends up forgiving Johnny after his talk with Allie and his visit in Okinawa with Kumiko and Chozen. Although his family was already wealthy during his youth, Sato began to grow even more powerful and more rich as time went on, due to him being the US Army's karate instructor, owning his own dojo, and also being involved in industrialism, as he later went on to bring Tomy Village to the present day by converting it into Tomy Village Green. Much like Daniel starting out as a car salesman and would end up with his own chain of car dealerships. Part of this rise to wealth is also noted by their attires, as Sato is shown wearing suits, much how Daniel was always in one, and their frequent advertisements seen all over their respective communities. Sato was the first outsider to learn Miyagi-Do, as it was traditionally passed down between father and son. But Miyagi asked his father to make an exception, much how Daniel was the first teenager he taught. The main basis for Sato's grudge is that Yukie was arranged to be married to him, but Miyagi was in love with Yukie and decided to go against tradition, and announced his love for her in front of the entire village, dishonoring Sato. Although Daniel was the one who ended up eventually with Allie as his girlfriend, albeit for a short period of time, this was the basis for Johnny's grudge with Daniel in the first place, despite him already having broken up with Allie. Sato's nephew Chozen is his top student and goes on to be an antagonist, much how Robbie is Daniel's top student at one point and goes on to be an antagonist as well. Despite being strong in his own right, it is shown later on that Sato would have lost the fight to Miyagi when he is saved during the storm, as he could not break the piece of wood that he and Miyagi found long ago, but Miyagi could do so with ease. This is similar to how Chozen and Johnny were superior fighters to Daniel many times before Daniel eventually gained the upper hand in both situations. As stated above, Sato trains his nephew Chozen, keeping it somewhat a similar theme of Miyagi teaching to Miyagi, much how Daniel goes on to train his own children in Miyagi-Do. When Miyagi's father passes away, Sato has ultimately lost his master, much how Daniel eventually loses his own master in Miyagi. Although still holding a grudge when this happens, Sato still has a sense of honor and civility and gives Mr. Miyagi 3 days to mourn, much how Daniel has some civility with Johnny following the All Valley and during their double date. Although Sato is roped into a bet that Daniel can't break 6 ice by Chozen, he still ends up holding his part of the deal, much how Daniel agrees to give Johnny a new car due to his cousin Louie and his biker friends damaging Johnny's old car. Both have also provided jobs for people, with Sato providing them for his dojo and his business, much how Daniel provided jobs for people in his dealerships, especially his cousin. Speaking of family members and attacking property, Chozen is instructed by Sato to leave a message by destroying Miyagi's farm and dojo, much how Louie is sending a message on his own retaliation for the graffiti on Daniel's billboard, although Daniel did not instruct Louie to vandalize Johnny's property. Before passing away, Sato entrusts Chozen with the Miyagi secret pressure points technique, much how Daniel goes on to teach partly Robbie the two-legged Miyagi-Do kick. Sato disowning Chozen leads him to act on his own accord and challenge Daniel in a fight to a death, much how Daniel eventually loses Robbie to Kreese after feeling betrayed by Daniel. Lastly, Sato is at peace with both his rival and Ukiei by the end of Karate Kid 2, much how Ali provides Johnny and Daniel both closure, and Daniel is at peace with his rivalry with Johnny. We also cannot overlook the callbacks and similarities that Daniel shares with his mentor, Mr. Miyagi. Firstly, Miyagi is almost always seen in his work attire, much how Daniel is almost wearing suits because of the dealership. Daniel implies that his love for cars came from spending time with Mr. Miyagi, much how Mr. Miyagi also went on to inspire Daniel to love and care for bonsai trees. When Daniel goes on to confront Johnny for the very first time at the dojo to convince him to stay away from his daughter and his friends, it is very reminiscent to Miyagi going with Daniel to confront Kreese and Johnny. Daniel was very protective of his daughter and distrusting of Kyler's intentions, much how Mr. Miyagi was very protective of Julie from Eric in the next Karate Kid. As mentioned above, Daniel would train his daughter in the ways of Miyagi-Do to defend herself, much how Mr. Miyagi took in Julie and would train her in the ways as he trained her grandfather. This is also similar to how Miyagi was taught from tradition from father to son, where Daniel passes it on from father to daughter. Sam's conflict with her dad over Kyler is very reminiscent to the conflict Daniel had with Mr. Miyagi, refusing to train him and him training with Terry Silver instead. Although Daniel had an excellent relationship with Mr. Miyagi, their very first meeting together went south pretty quickly, much how Daniel's first interaction with Robbie goes south because Louie putting him up to starting the car in the showroom. Mr. Miyagi takes in Daniel and goes on to become a father figure that was sorely missing in his life, much how Daniel does the very same for Robbie. While training Robbie, he not only uses the same lessons that Mr. Miyagi used for muscle memory, but also goes on to use a few of his own new lessons to get Robbie to develop reflexes. These lessons come together in a scene that mirrors Daniel showing Mr. Miyagi what he learned after claiming he hadn't learned anything, much how Robbie does the same with Daniel. Daniel goes on to use 2 life lessons that are still valuable to him, envisioning what he wants his future to look like and the importance of balance in his life. Later on, when training in the woods, Daniel dons an umpire's outfit, much how Miyagi did when teaching Daniel how to punch. Although Mr. Miyagi practiced the crane kick in front of Daniel, Daniel's difference with the kick is that he could not fully perform it in front of Robbie, as only Mr. Miyagi was able to do it. After Louie wrecks Johnny's car, he is confronted by Johnny at his house, very much how Sato frequently confronted Miyagi back in Tomi Village. Daniel has a personal family dojo, as Mr. Miyagi had one both in the States and in Okinawa. Daniel was Mr. Miyagi's lone student that went on to compete in the finals of the All Valley, much how Robbie does the same with Daniel's coaching. Daniel reteaches the lesson of balance to Robbie before the finals, much how Mr. Miyagi helped him find balance before fighting Johnny. Both Daniel and Mr. Miyagi are able to witness their students perform a secret technique that they did not realize their student had mastered. Daniel ends up taking Robbie to the original dojo to continue his training, much how Daniel visits the Miyagi dojo for the very first time with Mr. Miyagi. During their dojo fix-up, Daniel teaches Robbie how to hit the nail on the first try, the breathing exercise, and the painting and sanding lessons, all lessons Mr. Miyagi taught Daniel in Karate Kid 1 and 2. When Robbie is given a tour of the interior of the dojo, he finds the drum that Daniel used to master the drum technique, and also sees the rules of the dojo, where Daniel says everything is not what it seems, mirroring what Mr. Miyagi told him in the Miyagi family dojo back in Okinawa, and where Daniel also learned the drum technique. Later on, we see Daniel giving Sam some advice about love, very similar to how Mr. Miyagi gave Daniel love advice about Ali. One lesson that Daniel tries to teach Robbie that there is no such thing as a bad student, only a bad teacher, much how Mr. Miyagi told Daniel the same thing where Johnny wasn't the problem, but rather the way he was being taught by Kreese. Daniel has both a boy and a girl student that joined the dojo not too far apart as far as time, much how Julie was taught by Mr. Miyagi not long after Mr. Miyagi trained with Daniel. The wheel technique has training based around water, as Daniel was around water learning the drum technique in Okinawa. When Daniel saves Robbie from Trey, Cruz, and Derek, it is very similar to how Daniel was saved by Miyagi from Johnny and his gang during Halloween. Daniel also mentions to Robbie that they need to be patient and allow those who need them to come to him, which turns out to be the case with Dimitri, much how Daniel would eventually seek out the help of Mr. Miyagi. Daniel also realizes that he has to tailor and be patient with Dimitri, as Mr. Miyagi did the same for him as far as his lessons. He welcomes the former Cobra Kai students and recounts on how he was in Cobra Kai, similar in Karate Kid 3, where Miyagi would forgive him after joining Cobra Kai and helping him realize that he has strong roots. Daniel making up with Amanda at the dealership is very reminiscent to how Miyagi and Yukie would make up for their lost time in Karate Kid 2. Daniel also goes on to confront Kreese in his dojo, again similar to Miyagi confronting Kreese with Daniel in Karate Kid 1. Part of Daniel's firmness with Trey and Cruz could be very similar to how Miyagi would be firm with Daniel when he needed to be to get answers. Daniel would go on to give Anush a Miyagi-like wink as thanks for helping him with the heads up on Tom Cole's plan. While trying to figure out what to do about Doyona, Daniel drinks and remembers what it was like with Mr. Miyagi around, mirroring the scene that Mr. Miyagi would drink to remember his anniversary and his former family. In a way how Miyagi reunited with his old flame Yukie, Daniel does the same with Kumiko while visiting Tommy Village Green. When Sam finally reveals to her father why she no longer wants to do karate because of her fear with Tori, Daniel teaches the lesson of not giving in to fear, the same lesson Mr. Miyagi gave Daniel when facing Mike Barnes. When Daniel talks to Miguel directly for the first time, he notices Miguel's fascination with the car, much how Miyagi noticed the same thing about Daniel when visiting the dojo for the first time. During the end of Season 3, Daniel goes on to forgive Johnny, much how Miyagi forgave Sato, and saves Johnny from Kreese, in a similar manner to Miyagi saving Johnny from Kreese in Karate Kid Part 2, and Miyagi saving Daniel from both Silver and Kreese in Karate Kid Part 3. One of the greatest things from Season 3 and what has made Daniel a better person was him finding the balance that he needed. The first small step towards balance happened when he accepted responsibility for what happened at the school fight, admitting this to Amanda and also to Samantha when she blames herself. He realizes that he was trying to do the right thing, but if it wasn't for his rivalry with Johnny, there never would have been a huge fight. With this realization, it is seeking out Johnny and asking for his help to find Robbie, where he takes another step towards the right path. He tells Johnny that the kids shouldn't have to suffer because of their issues, and asks Johnny for his help in finding Robbie. Although this effort falls apart as quickly as it was put together, Daniel's willingness to help out Robbie and also admitting that he let Robbie down is what also drives him to be a better individual. Daniel wonders if helping Robbie was the right thing to do, which Amanda responds it was, and that Robbie just doesn't realize that Daniel did the right thing. When Tom Cole tries to buy out LaRusso Auto by convincing Doyona to not re-sign with the dealership, Anush reconciles with Daniel and things are almost back to the way they were in Season 1, with Louie and Anush back in the dealership, two loyal employees to Daniel that helped him run a successful dealership. Although at first his attempt to convince Doyona to resign doesn't go as planned, it is Daniel's trip to Okinawa that marks a major point of finding the balance missing in his life. Kumiko shares letters that Miyagi wrote to Yukie with him, and these letters are important because Daniel still feels lost without Miyagi's guidance and wishes he would have had everything figured out by now, but the letters point out that Miyagi at times was just as lost as he was, and Daniel also had a help in guiding him back to the right path. Although still afraid of Chozen at first, Daniel goes on to realize that he doesn't know everything about Miyagi though as he thought, and that people can change no matter what they were like in the past. Chozen asking Daniel for forgiveness goes on to slowly whittle away at the grudge Daniel still has against Johnny, and it is with Chozen's help that he goes on to defeat Kreese, repaying Daniel for sparing his life long ago. When Daniel returns, he is able to rebond with Samantha, and becomes even more Miyagi-like in helping Sam realize that she is not alone, as he himself also struggled with his own trauma, and that she is strong enough to pick herself up when she's down. It is also Sam who convinces Daniel to give Miguel a chance, realizing that Miguel is not much different from who he was back in the day. Daniel is also to give Miguel his side of the story, and Miguel helps realize that Johnny and Daniel both had a first love in Allie, and that they both had strong feelings for the same person. When reconnecting with Allie at the Christmas party, she is able to clear up a few things, with one of them being what happened after and during the senior prom in Karate Kid 2, that Daniel jumped to conclusions like he always does, and that he and Johnny should work together, as they are not much different from each other. It is this conversation that Daniel not only forgives Johnny, but also goes on later to save him from Kreese and teach alongside him in preparation for the next All Valley. One interesting thing to note here is that Daniel is not only much more skilled in this fight with Kreese compared to any other fight he's had in the franchise, as like Miyagi, he nearly avoids every strike Kreese throws at him, but also very confident and focused. It's almost like Daniel has become just like his mentor and master of his karate. This is what I would like to see happen to Daniel in the future. Although the possibility of the combined dojo splitting up is very real, I think at this point Daniel has to do everything in his power to put aside the grudge and realize that the common enemy is Kreese, and they cannot let him win at all. Daniel has also realized that Miguel is a good kid and will not be a bad influence at all when it comes to training, and could even go on to trust Miguel with some Miyagi-Do techniques. I think Daniel's friendship with Johnny could be strengthened even more by being able to have somebody to keep his karate sharp, as they never got to have that sparring match back in Season 1. Johnny teaching Daniel's students offense could be very eye-opening for Daniel, as Chosen himself told Daniel defense takes on many forms. It's not simply a block, dodge, or parry, but whatever that is needed to stop the opponent from attacking. By the same token, Johnny's student learning Miyagi-Do defense will be eye-opening for Johnny, as he will see that Daniel is not afraid to strike when necessary, much how he gave Daniel permission to do so against Kreese. Another thing that Daniel could teach Johnny is in the event that Robbie would be redeemed, how to be a better father to Robbie. This would be something that Johnny would have to ask on his own accord and admit his failings to Daniel as that he was scared to be a father. Nobody could deny that Daniel is a great father to his children, as he has done his best to provide as much as he could for them. As long as Daniel can stay grounded and willing to teach what he knows, his 34-year knowledge of Miyagi-Do will come in handy to prepare everyone for the tournament. After all, Daniel has to remember that for a person with no forgiveness in heart, living is worse punishment than death. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Will Daniel hold on to balance? If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing, giving it a like, commenting, and sharing it with your friends, as these all help the channel grow. Thanks for watching, stay beautiful, stay awesome, and we'll catch you around next time.